Hello, everybody. We're going to give people just a moment to come in, and then we will get things started. So we will be pausing for. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Bobby Carlton. I am the publisher and editor-in-chief of Lioness Magazine. I am also the founder of Innovation Women. And welcome to today's Lioness community event. We are going to be talking today about a topic that I think is super important to all of our community. And Lioness, we pride ourselves as being the source for everything you need to start and run your company. If you're just joining us today, drop a quick note in the chat. Where are you in from today? Where are you hanging out? Where are you calling in from? And before we get started, just want to give you this little gift. If you are interested in joining the Lioness community and getting access to all that it is we offer, we are putting into the chat a link for you to get an annual subscription to Lioness Magazine for only $12. So I am going to actually disappear, and I'm going to turn things over to Kim Dawson, who is going to be talking today about pricing your services for next level growth. Welcome, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm really looking forward to today, and I hope all of you who have joined in get a lot out of it, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But before we get going on all of that, I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen and introduce myself. All right. And here we go. So, as Bobby mentioned, we're talking about pricing your services today, specifically for next level growth. Pricing is something I'm very passionate about. I love talking about pricing. It's fun, and it's also really relevant for all of us business owners. We have to be pricing our services accurately in order to be profitable and to have successful businesses for the long term. So first, I want to start off by introducing myself. As Bobby mentioned, my name is Kim Dawson. I am a business strategist and a fractional CFO or CFO advisor, as well as an accountant. I do business accounting, not tax accounting, not anymore anyway. But a little bit about me. I work specifically with small business owners, whether they are in service-based businesses or in retail product businesses. And I focus heavily on revenue, profitability, pricing, as well as operations and hiring, systems management, all of that good stuff. And when I work with clients, usually when they seek out my services is at a point in their business where they are really struggling to be profitable. They feel that they're working very hard. They may even have several clients or a good customer base, but they're just not making the money that they think they should be making for all of the effort they're putting into their business. They are also usually seeking a lot of support. They feel like they're doing it alone. Maybe they have no team, or they have a small team and they're not quite sure it's working the way that they want it to work. So they're really needing some support and help getting their systems in place, their operations in place, and improving profitability. So that's what I help them do. And their end goal really is to have a business that they enjoy running, that they are excited about every day, and is also making them the money that they need so that they have plenty of time in their lives to do other things and also make money doing what they love to do. So that's a little bit about me. I also have a couple of things here. I am a podcast host. I've been doing the Sassy Strategist podcast for about 7 or 8 years now. And I also wrote a book a few years ago, Passion to Profits, Your Guide to Building a Successful Business You Love. And I'm currently working on my second book. So that's enough about me. I would love to hear a little bit about you. So I believe Bobby is going to put a little poll in there so that I can learn a little bit more about who all of you are. Great. So what kind of business do you all run? I would love to see how many of you, I assume most of you are probably in service just because of the title of today's webinar, but would love to know different types of services, as well as some of you who may also be selling products or in retail space. This is great. So a lot of professional services, personal services, online products. Terrific. Yeah, this is super helpful because I want to make sure that I'm gearing this today to be relevant to all of you who are sticking with us for the next hour or so. Great, great. Lots of professional services. Terrific. Okay. All right. So let's get into today and what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to really focus on are the three key factors, at least I look at them as the three key factors of pricing your services for growing your business. And we're going to look at these three areas. The first one is going to be when. When do you actually know it's the right time to increase your rates? The second piece is knowing how to actually come up with those rates. And then finally, once you've determined that it is time to increase and you know how much you're going to increase your rates by, how do you actually implement those price increases with your current customers as well as future clients so that you are the most successful? So I'm going to be talking about those three areas today. And along the way, I'm going to stop, ask some questions, get a little bit of feedback from you so that we make sure, again, that this is relevant to each of you. All right, so let's talk about the first thing here. The first is, when do you actually increase your rates? Now, technically, you could increase your rates whenever you feel like it, especially if you're a business owner, right? But that might not be the most strategic way to increase your rates. So I'm going to share with you a list of about 5 times or 5 areas in your business where you may want to think about doing a price increase. So the first is when your business is growing. Now, to me, growing could mean anything from your clients are growing. So maybe, you started out with 5 clients, now you have 10, you're growing up to 15, whatever. Whenever your client base is growing, it means that your business is growing. It could also mean that you're starting to need more resources. Maybe you need to start adding to your team, whether it's hiring employees or contractors. It could also mean that you're going after a bigger market. Maybe when you started your business, if I'm thinking professional services, maybe you were working with a particular market or a certain clientele, and now you want to really expand so that you can go after bigger clients. All of those are going to be examples of business growth. And when you're in that stage, it's really a time to consider or reconsider increasing your prices. The next situation that you might be in is when time management becomes a problem. So if we think about this from the perspective of being a new business owner and then going up and becoming a more experienced one, in the beginning, time management isn't always a problem. You may not have any clients when you're first starting out, or you might have one client, the Jerry Maguire situation. We've all been there, right? You start your business, you got that one special client. But, because you don't have a lot of clientele and you don't have too much going on, time management isn't really as noticeable. So you may not be as apt to set up systems and operations because you don't need them yet. But then when you've grown a bit and now you find that you have a lot going on in your business and you just can't keep control of it all, and time management is a problem, that's when it's time to start thinking about delegating, whether it's, again, contractors, employees, just building up your team, hiring outside people to help. That's a time to really reconsider your rates because you've got more resources, which takes me into the next situation, when you need more resources. And those resources could be anything. It could be additional people, but it could also be investments in your business. Maybe if you're selling products, you need to invest in a better website. So that's going to be, maybe a little expensive. So any type of resource that you need to invest in, you've got to be able to pay for it. Therefore, the prices need to go up. Another situation that you might be is niching down. Now, I first want to talk about niching down for a minute because it's something that many of us in the service industries hear about as being this great thing. Everybody's got to niche down. I would like to say that I don't believe everybody needs to have a niche or a niche, however you prefer to say it. I think that that is a preference for some, and it's a very good preference if that's the way that you want to take your business. It's not necessarily something you have to do. But what you may find when it comes to niching down is that it happens naturally. So if I use the example of, let's say you are just going to come up with something on the fly, but let's say that you are a graphic designer and you started out your business, again, with the thought in mind, I just need clients. So you took anybody and any project that came your way, and you were designing logos, you were helping with websites, you were, designing, marketing pamphlets or whatever, like you're doing everything. But then as your business grew, you realized that you had certain skills more so than others, or you had certain projects that you really liked working on more so than others. So you naturally developed a niche to say, I really like working with this market, or I really like offering these specific services. So as that happens, it becomes time to revisit your pricing, because the more specialized you become, the more value that your services have. And you want to make sure that you're not charging those general rates, that you're actually charging for the specialty that you provide. And then the fifth situation that I want to talk about is when you need to support for future growth and for sustainability. Again, thinking about the trajectory of a business, in the beginning, it's I got to get clients, but 5-10 years down the road, it's I've got to pay for retirement, I've got to sustain myself, I've got to sustain my family. So making sure that you are actually on track for that. And if you're not, which many business owners unfortunately are not always in that position, it's time to reevaluate your rates, because you need to make sure that you're covering for all of the things that you need for a sustainable business and sustainable life. So think about those things and think about how they impact you and your business. Like if you can see in any of these situations where you might be right now. So now I want to take what we've just talked about and look at the priorities that you might have at the different stages of business growth. And then I'm going to tie this into pricing. So the way that I break this down is looking at 3 different stages of business growth. And the first stage, which I've talked about all of these a little briefly, I'm going to get a little bit more detailed, is first the new business. When you are a new business owner, and I don't want to give an exact time to that, but maybe that's, 1, 2, 3 years, somewhere in that range. You're a new business, you're getting off the ground. Your priorities at that point are getting clients, getting people in the door, generating some form of revenue, as well as developing brand awareness, because nobody knows who you are and what services you provide. So you've got to get that word out there. But then after some time goes by, when you're no longer a new business, you go into the second stage, which is the stage of expansion and growth. So you have clients, but you might want more. You're generating revenue, but you'd like to generate more. But you're also in you're also at a time of developing systems and putting things together so that you're a little bit more efficient, a little bit more organized, a little more effective. And then you're also trying to get time management under control, because you went from a situation of not really having to have systems to now really needing to have them in place. Then the third stage is once your business is really established, and those businesses aren't really worried so much about generating new clients because they're getting tons of referrals, they're well established, they've got revenue under control, but you want to be focusing on sustainable revenue. You want to make sure that the customers keep coming, even though they're, much easier now than they were in stage 1. And you also have to focus on staying relevant as technology changes, as consumer demands change, as professional demands change. You want to make sure that you are staying current and people continue to come to you for your services and or products. Your other priority is also just maintaining efficiency as you move forward. So those are really the 3 stages of business. And now I would love to ask, as you think about your own business, what stage do you see yourself in right now? All right, so several in stage 1. So some new businesses, first couple of years, great time to be thinking about pricing. I'll get into that in a minute. Great, good. All right, a lot of you in both stage 1 and stage 2, so sort of an even amount there, and a few of you in stage 3, which is great. Love to see established businesses that have been around for a while and are doing well. Terrific. So I'm going to be talking about all of these stages, but I'm also going to be talking about how pricing is a factor in each of these. So before I go on to the next slide, I actually want to talk a little bit about pricing at each of these, just because we do have so many in both stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 can be really tricky for pricing because when you're first starting out, you really don't have much or any experience being in business doing what it is that you are doing. Right now, you all have different backgrounds. Maybe some of you did this service for somebody else. You worked for another company. You decided to go out on your own. Maybe this is just a talent that you've always been good at, and you've decided to make a business out of it. So you have a whole lot of different background stories, but still in the beginning, when you're first starting out, you're new at it. You don't necessarily know how much time something is going to take you, especially if you're in services. You may guess. You don't have a whole lot of experience in sales, in marketing, in any of it. So you get these clients coming in and you're so excited that you got the client. But then you're like, well, how do I price this? How do I'm pitching this proposal. I don't know where to start. So you just start guessing numbers. And maybe you figure out what other people are charging and you're like, well, should I charge that? I don't really know. Maybe I should charge less so that I can get some clients in the door and generate revenue. Maybe this job's going to take me 10 hours. You find out it really takes you 40. So there's just a whole lot of guessing that goes on. And when we get into the pricing specific piece of this, where I'm actually showing you how to price your services, that's going to really help you if you're in this stage 1, because you're going to have a little bit of a system in place so that you don't have to do so much guessing when it comes to your pricing. But I also want to say that if you are in stage 1, that it's okay to not really be great at pricing. It's okay to be guessing and missing the mark, because a lot of it is going to be trial and error. I also want to mention that if you are new to offering that service, you're not going to be as good at it as you will be 5 or 10 years down the road. So it's okay if you're not necessarily making as much money as you would like in the long term, because you're new at it too. As you get better at it, you'll be in a better position to charge more money, and you'll have more experience and expertise to back it up. So be patient with the process. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. Now, talking a little bit about stage 2, this is a time where pricing is critical, and it's also going to be important that you increase rates, but maybe not as rapidly as in stage 1. So what I mean by that is stage 1, you might be like trying things out. You get a client, you try it out, it's a project based, you move on, you get another client. So the second client's not going to know what you charge the first client. So it's okay if you're figuring things out with the pricing. But in stage 2, when you're having some level of consistency in your business, you don't want to be going to your clients every 3 months or every 6 months and raising your rates, because they're not going to be very happy with that. So it's an interesting stage to be in, because it's the one where increasing your rates is probably the most critical, because now you have this solid business that you really need to sustain. But at the same time, you can't just keep raising all the time, because you're going to turn business away. So you got to find that happy medium, which again, as we get into the pricing slides, you're going to see how to do that. And then finally, because some of you are in the stage 3 area of things when it comes to pricing, I would encourage you, once you see some of the formulas and calculations that I do, to just use those to revisit and to take a look at your pricing and say, am I still relevant here with my pricing? Am I still on the mark? Am I still covering my expenses? Am I still creating the profit margins I want? And using it as a check-in place for you. So summary, looking at pricing at all different stages is important. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about briefly before I move on is that pricing in each of these stages is going to look a little different. And I mentioned it briefly before, in that when you're in the new business stage 1 place, your rates are probably going to be the lowest that they've ever been. Then when you're in stage 2, you are going to be in that growth phase. And then stage 3, your rates are going to stabilize. You're not going to be increasing your rates quite as much. And then we talked a lot about rates growing primarily in in stage 2, as well as being a little all over the place in stage 1. So when you look at any of these, I would love it if you can put this in the chat for anybody who's willing to share, now that you know some of these situations to be looking out for in the stages of, your business is growing, time management's an issue, maybe you don't have the support you need. I'd love it if you could share a little bit about some of the struggles that you're having right now. And then I'm going to tie it into pricing if we can. So Bobby, if you could open up the chat and let's take a look at that and see. Would just love to know what everybody's dealing with right now in their businesses.
And we do have some great comments already. We have one person, Patricia, who is saying she's a relatively new business, has lots of potential clients, and she's trying to figure out what to charge. Most other people who do something similar to me charge between $60 and $80 per 1 hour service, but she wants to be more specific in the services that she provides. Help. The unknown, Brenda, is saying, finding out after I got a speaking gig that their budget was double what I quoted. My heart, Brenda. Yes. Shipping has increased dramatically, is a situation that one of our guests is talking about. Another person, Holly, is saying getting members to join my monthly membership forum. Megan Mayer is saying, yes, the same as Brenda, just not knowing pricing is super hard. Adam says cost growth with more staff, more subscriptions needed for timekeeping system and for Microsoft Office access, etc. There's some really, really interesting challenges here, and like the impact on pricing kind of comes from every direction.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to address all of those in one summary way that I believe I can, is that one of the things that I would want to caution you on, and I say this because I see it all the time, I know most everybody does it, when they look at their pricing, they think of things first from the customer perspective. They think, how much is this person willing to pay me? What are my competitors charging? What do I think they'll agree to? And I understand why that tends to be the go-to, because sometimes if we don't know ourselves how to price our services, we're going to look on the outside to figure it out. But the cautionary tale here is that when you do that, you might set yourself up, as someone had mentioned, where the client had a lot more to spend on this project and you kind of lost out, or you could not be charging enough to even cover the costs of running your business. So you could get yourself into a place that isn't ideal for your business. So what I want to encourage you to do instead is to have the starting point of figuring out asking yourself, what do my rates need to be in order for me to run my business, in order for me to have a business that's profitable, in order for me to thrive and continue into the future so that this business can support me for the long run. Start with that. And then once you've figured that out, then look at the clients, then look at the market and say, okay, this is what I need to be charging. Is my market willing to pay this? And then from there, whether the answer is yes or no, you go to the next stage. So an example of this would be, if let's say, and I'm just going to make up anything, let's say that you calculate all your numbers and you figure out that you need to be charging a rate of $100 an hour for your services. And you go out into the market and you find that the market rate is somewhere around 100 to 120. Great. Then you know that you can get that rate that you need to get. But if you go out into the market and realize that your market is only going to pay $80 an hour and you can't make that 100, you can't just drop down to 80 because that's what the market's saying that they're going to pay, because then that means that you're not going to cover your costs. You're not going to be able to sustain your business. So instead of just dropping the rates, it may be a time to reevaluate your market. So I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but there are so many different markets out there that sometimes the key is to make sure that you're aligning your services or whatever it is that you're offering, because I know we have some product-based here, people here as well, is to align that with the right market for you. So an example that I use a lot, if you've ever maybe seen me talk somewhere else before, it's an example I've come to time and time again because I just think it hits home, is I think about anything that you've ever seen or purchased yourself, like a pair of shoes. You know, you can go to one store where, you know, all the shoes are, you know, $30 or less. You can go to another store and buy shoes for anywhere from $50 to $150. Or you can go to another store and spend $600 to $1,000 on a pair of shoes, right? There is a market for each one of those items. There are people that spend $30 on shoes. There's people who spend $150 on shoes, and there's people who spend $1,000 on shoes. So the trick is to really understand, well, which shoe am I selling? Which shoe do I want to sell? And then am I aligning myself with that market? Because if you're creating $150 shoe, if that's what you're making, but then you're trying to sell it to a market that only wants to spend 30, that's a disconnect. And it's going to be really hard for you to sell what you're selling. The opposite can also happen. If you're trying to sell a $150 shoe to the $1,000 market, they may look at you like, really? Like, you're only charging $150? What's wrong with the product, right? So you got to make sure that you're aligning with the right market. So I hope that that helps answer some of the questions, but we'll get more into this as I start going into the next piece of this, which is how to actually determine your rates. Now, before I share the slide with you, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. As an accountant and a mathematician, I love getting into the numbers and doing calculations and formulas. I know that not everybody loves that so much. So I'm going to go through this and keep it very simple. And if you want more information on this, or you want to be able to do these calculations on your own, at the end of the presentation today, you'll have a link. You can reach out to me and download, and I have some resources for you to help you do this on your own. I do want to go through it today, and I want you to not get so wrapped up in some of the numbers that I'm doing, but really to focus more on the concept, because that's the important piece, is the concept of all of this. So this is a formula that I use with my clients on when we want to have a starting point before we get into pricing. So before you can know what to charge for your services, it's really important that you know what your annual revenue goal is. And by the annual revenue goal, what I mean is, how much money does your business need to bring in every year in order to cover all your costs, give you some profit, and provide sustainability that we've been talking about. So a basic way that I look at this and how to actually calculate your annual revenue goal is, one, I look at, if you are the business owner, what is your desired annual salary? Now, I always encourage people, be realistic, but also pick a number that you feel good about. So something that, if it's important to you, if you have, if you want to take a vacation once a year, if you, want to put your kids through college, like whatever it is that's important to you, you want to go out to eat once a week, keep those things in mind when you're coming up with what's my annual desired salary every year. Then you would add in all of your business expenses. So this is something that you would get from your profit and loss statement. You want to look and know everything that you're spending within your business. So this is not your personal expenses, because I have had that question come up. Remember, we're always thinking in terms of the business. And I say business owner's salary because you are the business owner, right? So whether or not you're taking that as salary or just an owner's draw, personal situations. But you want to focus on your business expenses. Then you want to add in for any employees that you either currently have or are planning to hire in the next year or two. Any contractors that you're working with or that you want to hire. You want to add all of that in there. Then, of course, you have to account for taxes. And then I have two categories, one for business savings and growth and one for personal savings and growth. So the business savings and growth is going to be for things that you might have to invest in your business in the future. So maybe every couple of years you want to have a new website, new branding photography, new, refresh your brand, new logo, new colors, all that good stuff. So those are investments and you want to be able to have money for that. And then the personal savings and growth is going to be, again, as the business owner, what do you want to be setting aside for your own personal retirement, for personal goals that you might have? So you want to make sure that all of these things are included in the annual revenue goal. So here's just a very basic example of what that could look like for a solopreneur who has maybe an employee or a few contractors. So let's just say that this is what your numbers are. Again, they're just for example purposes. And you throw in a couple of numbers, you put it together, and you come up with this number of $225,000 a year as an annual revenue goal. Now that you know what you're aiming for, it becomes much easier to come up with your pricing. So we're going to kind of go into that for a second. So what I would love to just ask you to do, and you don't have to put anything in the chat, this is nothing that you're going to actually share with anybody, but I would love for you to just take a moment and ask yourself, do you think that if you had this formula in front of you, which now you do you think it would be fairly easy for you to come up with this revenue goal for yourself? Or do you feel like you would need additional resources to come up with this number? And then also, do you kind of have a ballpark just off the top of your head of where you think this number might be for you? So just kind of take a moment and think about that, maybe jot down some notes. Something that might come up for you is you may say, hey, you know what? I haven't looked at my profit and loss statement in a while. Maybe I should take a look at that and see how much I'm actually spending in my business. Or it could be, I don't really know what a profit and loss statement is, and I need to do some more research into that and find out what it is and how to get one. So just, take a couple of notes for yourself as we're going through. All right, so now that you know how to calculate your annual revenue goal, the next piece of this is knowing what your client capacity is. So before I really get into this slide, what I want you to think about is if, let's say that you are offering a service, which I believe most of you are. So you're offering a service, and let's say that you have come up with an annual revenue goal of $100,000 for a year. I'm just going to keep it simple, right? Then you ask yourself, okay, I know I need to make $100,000 every year. How many clients do I actually have the capacity to work with every year? So if you run the numbers, ask yourself some questions, we're going to get into this in a minute, and you say, I think I could work with 10 clients every year. That's what I have the capacity for, is 10 clients a year. Well, if you know that you need to make $100,000 in a year, and you know that you have the capacity for 10 clients, then that tells you that on average, each one of those clients will need to pay you $10,000 a year in order for you to meet that goal. So this is why it's so important to have an understanding of your client capacity. Now, how I suggest you do that is by asking you some of these questions, some factors to consider. So one of them, the first one I want to talk about for a minute, is knowing how many hours per week you have available for client work. And I use what I call the 50-50 rule, which means that however many hours you have available each week to work, consider that half of those hours will be for client work and the other half will be for working on your business. So non-billable time. So if you were to say, Kim, I want to work 30 hours a week. That's good for me. That's what works for my lifestyle. 30 hours is what I got. Then I would say, okay, that means you've got about 15 hours a week available for client work and 15 hours a week for business development. So knowing this can help you figure out capacity, depending, of course, again, on what type of work you do. The second question to ask yourself is, how many client projects can you work on at one time? So again, this depends on the type of business you have. If I use the graphic designer again as an example, a graphic designer may take on a project They know, okay, this is the project I have to work on. It's probably going to take me 6 weeks from the beginning to the end of the project. And I know that I can do 3 of those projects at one time, right? So asking yourself those types of questions. The third is, are you the only one that's going to provide the services, or are you planning to hire people, or do you have people already who also will provide these same services? So are you looking to be a little bit more of a CEO and you want to hire some other people to provide these services, or is it just going to be you? Because based on how you answer that question is, of course, going to determine how many clients you actually can serve within your business. And then finally, don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, but are you striving to provide quality over quantity? So it's something to really ask yourself is, are you of the philosophy that I want to provide this service so that it can get to lots and lots of people? I want to benefit a lot of people. I want to help a lot of people with my service. And therefore, you're just trying to build up the quantity of who you work with. Or is it, no, I want to really enhance this client experience. I want to give one-on-one attention to all of my clients. I want to be there to serve them the best way that I can. So therefore, I really can't work with that many people at one time. So these are all questions to consider when you're thinking about client capacity. So now we're going to put those two things together, which I started to talk about briefly before, and give you a little example of what this could look like. So you could say, if we use the numbers that we came up with before, that if your annual revenue goal were $225,000 a year, that also equates to a monthly goal of $18,500. So if you're thinking about those questions I just presented of how many projects can you take on at once, or how many clients can you work with in a week or a month, or whatever time frame works for your business, it can help you kind of find, all right, this is where I should be landing as an average number. So we'll talk about that more in a second. So if your monthly revenue goal were $18,500 a month, and you say, well, I have the capacity to work with 10 clients every month, then on average, each client would need to be bringing in $1,850 per month. Now, this is not meant to be an exact number. It's meant to help you create a range. So you may have some clients who are not requiring very many services from you, and you have some clients that maybe are requiring a lot of services from you. So maybe this average number is like sort of in the middle. So you might have some clients that are paying you $1,000 a month and other clients who are paying you $3,000 a month, and that's fine, as long as you know, okay, I'm about where this is. So when you take just the time to go through these numbers, the question that I want you to ask yourself is, this of course is after the webinar, when you're going through this, going through your notes, and maybe you will, as I mentioned, I have some resources you can download. Maybe you're going through those. Say to yourself, where am I now? And how is this comparing to these numbers? Because you might find that your pricing is actually right on the mark. And so if you're having profitability issues, it may not be necessarily in the pricing, it may be somewhere else along the way. Either maybe you're working with too many clients and you just don't have the time for them. Maybe you don't have enough clients. Could be other things. Could also still be the pricing. You might not have accounted for higher profit margins that you would like. So maybe right now you're making 3%, you'd really like to make 10%, that sort of thing. But it's a good gauge. It's good to help you see where you're at. What I usually see people experience when they go through this exercise is they'll say, wow, I'm not charging nearly as much as I need to be paying for everything. So going back to those questions that some of you were asking in the Q&A before, or excuse me, in the chat before, is if you're trying to guess at your pricing, again, start with your business and knowing what it is you need to charge to pay for these things, and then compare it to what's going on in the market and go from there. So I want to segue now into how to actually implement these price increases. And I'm going to ask for some feedback from you as we go through. But before I move on, I would love it if anybody has any particular thoughts from what I just talked about in regards to that pricing. Is there something that really stood out for you when you were looking at those numbers? Did a light bulb go off for you? I would love to hear if anybody has any insight on that.
Kim, we have so many questions and so many conversations that are going on in the chat. It is off the charts.
All right.
Wow, there's a lot. And like some people are asking specifically, like, how would you price services when you're doing group work, on a weekly or biweekly basis? Another person has clients going through a merger and she knows she's going to lose them as a result. So she's trying to plan for that revenue. We also have other people who are trying to account for, like, what do they account for in terms of taxes? Is there a general percentage that you should use? Somebody else is like, do we add our wish list employees or the ones that we currently have? So
great question. I'm gonna like fire off a couple of quick answers. So first, for taxes always really depends on what tax bracket you're in and what situation you're in. So for example, if you're a solopreneur and you happen to be married and you file a joint tax return, then your spouse's income is going to greatly affect what range you are in, what tax bracket you're in. So that can be a little challenging, right? So I would say look historically at what bracket you've been in and use that to go forward. So if you've been in a 15% bracket, then set aside 15%. If you've been in the 25 to 30%, then kind of allocate for that. But also keep in mind that if you're looking just from your own perspective, that your business expenses are tax deductible. So a good rule of thumb that you could do for a basic estimate is when you look at that revenue goal, set aside like 10 to 15% for taxes as a guess. And probably you'll have set aside a little more than you need, but that's okay because that's just money that'll stay in the bank for you. Another question that you had just presented was, how do you plan when you have a client that you might be losing, especially if it's a significant client, which is the impression that I get. So that I think is going to tie more into your marketing than in your pricing, because I think that if you're looking at capacity and you say, okay, I have the capacity, again, making things up here, I've got 5 clients that I have the capacity for, I'm losing one big one. How am I going to replace that? Maybe you need to go out and get another big client, or maybe you need 2 smaller clients to make up for that. So I think that that's going to be a little bit more on the business development side than necessarily the pricing. And you had asked a couple of other questions in there. There was one I wanted to address. And could you remind me what some of those were?
Yeah. And actually, we've had a couple of requests for you to go back to the slide with the estimated figures. And also if you could showcase the slide number 2 again as well. So, but some of the questions that people are asking, there was one where we're being asked how you'd price services when you're doing group work on a weekly or biweekly basis, if that's part of what it is you're doing.
Great. So let me answer that. That was the one I was thinking about. So I would look at it as an overall. So for example, let's say you were doing a group program, and let's say that it was a month. I always like to use the easy numbers, right? So it's a month, it's 4 weeks, and you're meeting with these people every week. If that were the only project that you were doing, the only thing that was working in your business, and you figured out that you needed to make $5,000 that month to meet your numbers, and you say, okay, I'm going to do this group program and I need 5 people to sign up for it, then you would need to charge each of those people $1,000, and then you would get your goal. So that's how I would do it. I would look at the overall and then work backwards to figure out how much you actually need to charge each person. Now, of course, you're probably doing more than just one group program. So if you were doing 5 group programs, then you could divide that by 5 and say, okay, each person has to pay $200 a month if I got 5 people in each of these different programs. So it's a little bit of backward calculations, but that is how you would, that's how I would recommend that you actually do it. Start by looking at overall capacity and then reverse engineer, work backward to get to the pricing. So quickly, I did hear that you wanted to go, I think this is the slide that people wanted to see. So yeah, go ahead and take that. And of course, I don't know if it's helpful to do a screenshot or something like that if somebody wants to have.
And don't
reference.
forget, folks, we will be sharing the recording, so you will be able to go back and see this. And on top of that, Kim is, we've got links to Kim's information, so she shares a lot of information here, but you will be getting the recording.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. And so I do have a link for a resource guide that will help you with this as well. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about this, and you can reach out to me because I do have a couple of guides that are not on my website, but I do have them. So if you want something that has a lot of this information, I'm happy to share that with you. Just reach out. I'm happy to have that conversation. So, and I do know this is a lot of information. I cover a lot in a short amount of time. It's so involved. There's so much to know. And I really want every one of you to walk away from this today feeling like, wow, that I got something out of today. So that's my goal. But there's a lot to sit with as well. I realize that. Okay, so let's move on. This is the final component, our top three, right? So now that you know, okay, I know I'm at the right time to increase rates. I know what those rates need to be. I know where my pricing needs to be. I know what your goals are. Now, how do you actually go ahead and implement them? So the first thing that I recommend doing is reevaluating your market. This is something I mentioned a few moments ago when I was giving you my silly story about the shoes. But this is a great time. Once you really get clear on what the pricing is, you've got to say, well, am I really in line with the market that I'm trying to reach, who I'm trying to reach? Is this what they're willing to pay? Yes or no? And if no, do I need to reevaluate here? So the first thing, this is a little process that I take my clients through, is first look at making a client list and look at all of the clients who you've worked with over the past year or two, and just make out a whole list. Say, this is, I've worked with this person, I've worked with that person, or this company, or whoever, depending on if your clients are businesses or consumers or whatever. And then once you've made up that list, I would suggest breaking the list down into 3 different sections. You can do little check marks, whatever system works for you, but maybe put a star next to all of your favorite clients. These are the clients you love working with. They're easy to work with. They're fun to work with. They appreciate what you do for them, like all the good things, right? They pay you on time. Very good, very important thing. You paid on time. So give a star to your favorites. Then have a little mark for your okay clients. Like, I could keep working with these clients. They work, they're good. They're not my favorites, but I'm good working with them. And then there's the final, which are those clients that kind of drive you crazy. You know, they're emailing you on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. and you're like, okay, you know, have a little mark for those clients that if you would prefer to not work with them anymore, they're kind of on the thanks list, but we'll see you later. Right. And then the third piece of this is when you look at the list and you look at your favorites and your okays and your not so favorites, where's a common theme among the favorites? And then look for some sort of a specialty. There's some sort of a connection. It doesn't necessarily have to be a niche. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to be an industry. It doesn't have to be a very specific service. It doesn't have to be super specific. It just has to be something that they have in common. Like, I mean, it also could be a personality thing. If you're working one-on-one with a lot of clients, it could be that all of your favorite clients have a certain personality trait that you really like working with. It really lights you up in your work. So it could be anything, but just look for the common theme. And once you find that common theme, it can really help with the marketing, and it can also help you align with your pricing. So the second piece of this is transition. Once you are really clear on your market, and I do want to say that no matter how long you've been in business, you always can reevaluate your market, because the market changes and the economy changes and all kinds of things change, right? Our world is ever changing. So even if you're established, even if you're in that stage 3, you can reevaluate your market. And once you get really clear on that and say, this is the market I'm sticking with, this is the market I'm going with, Now think about how you're actually going to bill them, how you're going to price them. So I'm going to talk very briefly about a couple of different ways, because there's a whole lot of ways that you can bill your clients. Some of you probably bill hourly, and I don't have that on here, but there's a reason why I don't have it on here. So hourly is really common if you're in the new business range, which many of you identified as new business stage 1. So hourly is super common for that. And it makes sense because you're at a place where you don't really know how much time something's going to take you, and you're not quite sure about your rates. So that's a great place to start. But once you start moving into that growth and expansion stage, you may want to move away from hourly, because the more skilled you get, the quicker and better you get at what you're doing. You don't want to reduce what you're charging for being more qualified. So that's a great time to transition and say, okay, well, depending on your business, does it make sense to go monthly retainer or project-based or packaged? So you have a couple of different options based on your business. So I would love to know real quickly in our, actually, let me go back for a second. I believe we have our final poll here of right now in your business, how are you currently billing your clients? All right, so a little mixture of everything. So some package service, some hourly, some monthly retainers, project. Yeah, a little mixture of everything, couple of other. Yeah, great. Yeah, and I do want to say that based on your business, any of these can work. So I do not want to give the impression that one is necessarily better than the other. I'm just personally, hourly is the only one that I would say great for new business, might want to get away from that as you become more experienced in what you do. But any of these really can work. And sometimes hourly even does work if you just don't want to be in sort of a package mode and just like, I'm just going to bill hourly. Whatever works for you. But with these, I do want to mention that you can change your pricing model as you grow your business, as you move along, because maybe something that once worked for you doesn't really work anymore. And looking at this, it looks like a lot of you are project-based. Right? Okay. So, but a little mixture of everything. So when you are changing your pricing, especially if you realize that, and this happens a lot, where you crunch all the numbers and you're like, oh, I am not charging nearly enough to cover the cost of my business. Sometimes changing how you price and the way you bill your clients can make the transition a little easier. So something to consider, I'm going to mention it briefly. I know we're coming up on time here, and we are almost done. So this is a little example of how to implement a price change specific to client packaging, which was that third one on the list. So what you could do if you are offering client packages, or you're considering doing it, depending again on the nature of your business, you can come up with something where you say, okay, I have kind of an intro package, my lower price point, and then you have a middle, and then you have, the full package, everything. So you think about all the different services you provide, and you can say, okay, well, package one will just have like one or two of those services. My middle package will have, be pretty robust, but not be everything. And then that final package could have everything in it. And what you could do is you could say, okay, well, that middle package is going to be that average that I really need to be earning in my business to meet my goals. And then you can have the packages that are a little less and the packages that are a little more. So at the end of the day, everything kind of averages out in the middle. So this is one way to do it. And it's also a great way if you don't want to discount your services, but you want to meet the needs of more clients. So somebody comes to you and you give them a proposal for all the things you think that they need. You give them the price, they come back to you and they say, it's a little out of budget. Instead of discounting, you could say, okay, I can work within your budget. I've proposed to you package 2. How about package 1? That might work a little bit more in your budget. You'll still get these great services, and you, the business owner, are not having to discount what you're offering. So these are some great ways to implement those new prices and make it so that it's more accepting to your clients and so the people that you're working with. So if we're kind of putting this together, communicating these price increases, here's a couple of things that I would recommend. So let's say that you are doing a full price increase, you're across the board, you've decided you're going to up your rates, and you already have clients that you're working with on a retainer basis, or people who are repeat customers or clients. you could consider crafting a general email or letter, and it goes out to all your clients. And in that letter, you can follow what's called the sandwich technique. Some of you may be familiar with it, where you start out with something positive, tell the clients how much you love working with them, how great it is, how much you appreciate them, etc. And then in the middle, you kind of deliver the news of, hey, by the way, my prices are going up. And then in the end, you focus on something positive again, thanking them for their business, reminding them. Usually I would say in the beginning of a letter is when you would remind them of all the great success that they have had working with you. And then in the end say, I hope we continue to work together as we implement these changes. Great way to present the information. And also remember that when you talk about the price increases, focus on how it benefits them. Don't talk about you. Don't talk about your prices have gone up. Don't talk about the economy's crazy and you need to charge more. Don't talk about all of that stuff. Talk about what they're going to gain from the price increase. Better customer service, more of your time, better quality, more robust services, whatever it is. Focus on what they're getting from this. Okay. And, just some other strategies to consider. If you find that you run these numbers and they're just really different from where you're at, you don't have to make these increases all at once. You can do it gradually. I mentioned before, you can transition from one billing method to another. It makes so it's not quite as drastic because, like, for example, if you're charging hourly and you go from $80 an hour to $150 an hour, your clients are going to be like, whoa, right? So maybe you say, well, I'm doing $80 an hour now, but I'm going to transition to selling packages. And then the package is $1,000. There's no connection anymore. So they're not sitting there thinking, well, this person just doubled their rates. And with new clients, much easier to start them at your new rates. So this is just kind of in conclusion. We've gone over timing, we've gone over the amount, and we've gone over how to implement. And I know it's been a lot of information. So hopefully you will take this away. You can get the information from Bobby after the fact and kind of go through it and sit with it. So I just want to say thank you for allowing me to present today. It's been really fun. I really enjoyed all of the feedback and everything that you have shared. If you want to reach out to me, you can scan that QR code with your camera, and you will get all kinds of links to my resource guide, to my podcast, to all of that good stuff, my website, and a couple of ways here. So that's that.
That was fantastic. And we do have only like 2 minutes left. There are a couple of questions. Maybe there's one or two we can address quickly. So
Yes,
we have a
I'm so
really
sorry.
interesting one here from Gina. She said, any tips for setting a price for consulting service that an organization has requested, but you've never done before? So you're setting up a new business educational program on a new platform in this case, like you're starting from scratch.
Yeah, great question. So what I would suggest is go through what you think you're going to be doing. Go through the services, go through what you expect, how much time do you think it's going to take, what kind of resources, and come up with your best guess. But when you go to present it as an introductory service, I guess. So what I'm saying is let's say it's a new client. Don't say, hey, these are my rates and this is where we're going from here on out. I might suggest saying, okay, let's put this together. Let's see how it goes. And in 3 months, let's reevaluate and see where we're at. And then at that point, I can give you an updated proposal for the next 3 months or for the next 6 months. So you can sort of stagger it. That's how I would do it.
Excellent. And I think that's really good. We also have another question that's similar, was speaking to emerging markets. And again, as you say, present it as an introductory price and reevaluate. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again, Kim. Maybe you can hit that next slide and I can tell everybody that this was brought to them by Innovation Women. So Kim, as well as more than 2,000 other speakers, are available for events on Innovation Women. You can connect directly to amazing, awesome speakers and subject matter experts And it is a fantastic resource for you if you are looking for speakers and subject matter experts. So innovationwomen.com is also the proud owner of Lioness Magazine. So thank you again, Kim. We are going to be doing our next community event will be Lioness Networking on July 11th, noon to 1 Eastern. And I hope you will all join us. Thanks again, Kim.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody. Please reach out if you have any questions. Happy to help.
All right. Take care. Thank you again. Bye-bye.